The One Piece live action has been very successful, and it left a lot of people wondering why other live actions are not. When we hear of live action, the first thing that usually comes to people's minds is Disney, because they're the ones that are milking the hell out of the live action genre. And funny enough, most of their live actions that they're calling live actions are technically not live actions, they're just CGI, but neither here nor there. I did not watch the One Piece anime. I had intended to, but then other anime filled my time. And I wasn't really getting that pull to really watch it, even though it looked like a cool adventure, not to mention it has over 1,000 episodes. So when I heard it was getting a live action, the first thing I thought was, oh dread, I bet the fans are gonna hate this. And then when I heard that Netflix was going to be putting it out, I experienced further consternation, but it was no skin off my bones, because it's not like I was a fan of One Piece in the beginning anyway. Then they released the whole season, and I was like, you know what, let me go try it. People are talking about it, they claim it's okay, but I didn't want to really get too much into it because I wanted to make that decision for myself. And oh my gosh, am I glad that I did. This live action show works. Now, I wasn't sure whether or not it worked from a fan's point of view, because there are a lot of times where new audiences will come in and they like something, and the fans absolutely hate it, particularly because it deviates from the source material. However, when I'm judging a show, I judge it as a standalone entity. Is the show capable of standing on its own 2 feet, or does it require you to do hours upon hours and days upon days of homework in order to understand the show in this completely different medium that you're consuming? And the answer is no. Even though you can glean a lot more detail by watching the anime, you can come in as someone who's not a One Piece anime fan and completely get the story and enjoy it and the characters. So it left me wondering, what is the difference between the Disney live actions and the One Piece live action? Granted, there's one that is a show, so there's a little bit more time for them to span out the characters' development. But then again, a lot of the Disney live actions are not based on shows, they're based on movies. So if you're making another movie that's twice as long as the original movies, it shouldn't be twice as boring.
It's like every single live action they've touched is like either boring or just actually shit.
There's definitely more room for you to work and pan out certain details, but yet Disney seems to change elements of the story that made the original so endearing in the first place.
We absolutely wrote a Snow White that
she's
is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can.
Shut up! Oh, shut. Rings of Power did this as well, and while I thought it was an okay show, I could see the obvious problems, and fans were absolutely livid.
House Dragons, of course.
House of the Dragon, on the other hand, I could go in and watch that without having read any of the books on which Game of Thrones was based. So here's something to consider for live actions whenever you're deviating from the source material, because if I were to choose between steering away from the source material and keeping as close to it as possible, I would think it would make more sense to keep as close to it as possible, because not only are you bringing in new people, but you're also utilizing the franchise's name, knowing that you're going to be bringing in fans from the franchise to come and watch this as well. And you may wonder, well, why would fans of One Piece or the source material want to watch a live action if they've already watched it in the animated portion? Well, one of the number one things and the number one reasons why people would do this is the very thing that studios try to hijack. It's the nostalgic element. Many fans grew up watching their favorite series, and the idea of a live action version coming out evokes those feelings of nostalgia. They want to see the story through a fresh piece of eyes or see it told in a slightly different way. And when I say different way, you started from animation, so you're curious how it's going to look in the real world. It's a fresh perspective. It's a different medium. Just like people who read the books, whenever they realize that the book is going to be adapted to a movie or a TV show, of course they're going to watch it. That's why the Twilight movies and Harry Potter movies did so well. They already had that fan base from the beginning to usher in the success. There's also the element of visual appeal. You want to see what your favorite character that you had a crush on or that you admire looks like, cast it as a real person. Of course, you can relate to the animated character still, but seeing it brought to life is very interesting. It's the same reason why people are curious about those channels that do those IRL Photoshop glow-ups where you will give them a character that you like and they make a realistic version of it. Like when I draw my characters or my monsters, they're usually in a cartoonistic element, but I would love to give some of my work to someone who deals in realistic art portrayal to see what they come up with, to see from their mind and creativity how they would essentially bring my creature to life. And seeing it through that fresh pair of eyes is just, it's jaw-dropping, especially if it's done the right way. So a lot of the reason boils down to nostalgia, but also the visual appeal, since live-action adaptations offer a different visual experience when compared to the animated version. And fans could just simply simply be curious about how their characters, the settings, the established places, and even the special effects will be realized in this live action format. They also are curious about the characters. They want to see how they're portrayed or what more is added. Live actions may add different elements while keeping the story pure, and there's certain things that can't translate over from the animated version. Like characters' faces can't do those weird things because you're going to be stretching into the uncanny valley a little bit, which One Piece kind of sort of did, but it kind of felt like Kung Fu Hustle, so it was already ridiculous, so you believed it. But it would be interesting to see how they will recreate certain scenes from the animated version and how that would look in a real life setting. The other reason why fans would go and watch live action is to connect with other people, because the real reason that people are doing this live action is, let's be honest, they're trying to cash in on something. But how do they cash in on that? Get new audiences. There are a lot of people I know, like my father, who would never watch anime. He's just like, he thinks that I'm a child because I watch anime. Why are you watching cartoons? You're not 6. Meanwhile, I'm laughing in 2D, thinking to myself, yeah, okay, go watch Attack on Titans and tell me if that's freaking for children. But for real, like, you can talk to people about it. People who haven't seen it. My father would watch One Piece on Netflix. He would never watch the anime. But because it's an IRL thing, he would watch it, because it's more relatable to him that way. There's just some people who prefer that.
I like it.
So it's a way to expand the fan base. And by doing so, you bring people together. Like, I've been so happy being able to talk to people who watch the anime. I do watch a lot of anime, but I've never watched that anime. And so it was a way to connect with other people who have. They could talk about the show, and they can easily draw comparisons or educate me on the lore, things that they left out of the live action, things that they made better, etc. The live actions can offer this kind of variety also. People like experiencing a familiar story in different ways. It's why we'll watch different retellings of stories like Pinocchio while keeping the source material. And one thing that I noticed that a lot of other movies will do, they'll say that they're inspired by this. It's not just a remake, they're inspired. So that already lets you know, it prefaces that this is not going to be the same story. It's going to have the same elements based on the same story, but it's going to be a different story. And fans can appreciate the creative liberties or reinterpretations that live action adaptations introduce. Sometimes they'll explore themes in a more nuanced way due to the presence of real people playing this. But regardless, a lot of live action adaptations fail when capturing the magic of their source material simply because there's no passion put inside of it, and they try to change too much while banking on the franchise's name to gotcha people, which I think is very deceptive. It's the same as people being told that you're gonna have someone show up to your party or an artist perform for you, only to find out that it's someone who's a lookalike. I don't know what it is about some of these showrunners, but they try to bring in the fan base to garner hype for their live action, but then they, in the same breath, alienate the fan base. These showrunners know that the reason why the fans even are coming in is because they love the original source material. The source material was successful as is. So then bringing them in by saying, this is going to be that, but then pulling a gotcha and bait and switching the fans and then deviating heavily away from the original beloved source material will alienate the existing fan base. And usually when people do that, they think, oh, screw the fans. We're looking for new fans anyway, even though the majority of the people who they're depending on to make this a success are the fans. The fans are what are already going to build up the excitement. You already have half the audience you need. But then the fans are going to start bitching about it, and people are going to watch and be curious. And usually what happens, like with Rings of Power and The Witcher and many other shows, is that a funny thing occurs when you change the source material. You take away the magic and the value and quality of what made the source material so successful to begin with. And whether someone comes in who is a new person who is not a fan, they're going to pick up on that because you're making it different. And it's not just the act of making it different, taking creative liberties, you're ruining the story. It's like, I have to use analogies because people don't get it and they may ask, what's the big deal? But let's say, like for example, my mom taught me how to cook zucchini bread. We learned from somebody else, a lady next door, and she gave her recipe to us. And so we use that same recipe and we add chocolate chip because that's the option, you can add or without. And then everybody loves her zucchini bread. Everyone who's tasted it, they're like, it's so moist, it's so delicious, it's like the best zucchini bread I've ever tasted. Now imagine if I were to take that zucchini bread and everyone knows that it's my mom's zucchini bread, this is the pastry that they've enjoyed, and then I decide, you know what? I'm telling everyone it's my mom's recipe so they know what to expect. But then I bait and switch them and I make it different and I change all the ingredients or half the ingredients so that it's my own thing and it comes out tasting like shit. Or maybe it's okay, but it doesn't any longer taste like zucchini bread. People would be upset because they were expecting it to be the zucchini bread that I said it was. You look at something and you're like, I'm expecting it to taste a certain way because that's what you said it was based on. It's the same thing with the live actions when you change the source material. There's nothing wrong with adding in little details here and there. I mean, that's normal, especially if you're translating it to live action. But when you start deviating heavily away from what made the first iteration of it successful in the first place, then you lose the magic that brought in fans in the first place. And that's going to translate over into these new fans who don't even know anything about The Witcher. I didn't know anything about The Witcher, and I fell off of it because it got weird. Whether what happened was canon or not, I just wasn't interested. I was in the first season, and then it just fell off so hard. And then later, much later, I find out that they had started deviating from the source material, and they were rewriting certain characters or focusing on side characters more than they were on the main character, and I didn't know any of that stuff at the time when I fell off. But now I understand.
They're dumb as rocks.
I just think it's really stupid to find out that you have a golden goose that lays golden eggs when you feed it a certain food, and then you're like, for whatever reason, you know what? You know what would be great if we feed it the complete opposite of what's causing it to lay golden eggs. And then when you realize you've changed its diet and it's no longer laying golden eggs, you get mad at the goose. Or you get mad at the people who used to buy your eggs and claim, wow, they're still eggs. Like, bro, come on. The immaturity in some of these showrunners for me, that's what really does it. Even though you see situations like One Piece where they do stay with the source material while taking very light creative liberties and how successful it is, they'll see that and they'll still go and keep making the same mistake over and over again like they're insane. As I've said before in other videos, if you're gonna go to that length to change the source material, just make a different story. But oh no, that's a risk. Because if we don't use a successful franchise name, how are we gonna get people to easily come and watch? It's deception, and people, what will happen is they'll start to realize what's going on, and whenever they hear the studio's name being uttered, like Disney, they'll just check out before they even check out any of their stuff. They've been burned so many times, and that one little trick can only work and fool people so many times before they catch on. So even when you do have a good product that is sticking closely to the source material come out, people have been bitten so many times, they no longer want to touch you with a 10-foot pole or anything that you put out, which is why now you see studios and movies are grasping at straws trying to get people to come back. You alienate the fans, you insult the fans, and then you get upset when they leave, and then little too late you try to bring them back. There's only so much abuse someone can take. And just like in a relationship, after you've chased them away, your tears and your sorries will no longer work. They've already withstood so much that by the time you've supposedly changed your ways and ameliorated your life and your personality, and you're no longer crying wolf, you've already cried wolf so much that they are now very wary of you and distrustful, and they probably will never ever trust you again. So those fans, a lot of them that left, are gone forever. And I think the companies are now just starting to feel that, especially when you see the success of works like One Piece, or at least the first season at the time of this video, because for all we know, the second season could come out and they're like, you know what, let's just not do what we were doing that made this successful and do the complete opposite and just ruin this. And I think the reason why One Piece also was successful is because the One Piece owner, the anime guy, the one who did the anime, he was heavily involved in it as well, which helped. And it's like you're so incompetent that you require people from outside to tell you how to do your job. Like, I don't know, it's just wild to me. It's so wild to me. You would think that something like this would occur once in a while, but now it seems to be the norm for Western media. I don't know why that's a thing right now, but people are so much more concerned with preaching to the audience and insulting them, the people who you need money from. Like, I don't know when this practice became a thing, but it is quite bizarre if I say so myself. Anyway, all this to say, if you're gonna be making a live action of something, stay close to the source material. Find out what made it loved and treasured in the first place, and don't deviate from that. Like, it's not hard to grasp this, unless the people who are now working at these big name studios are there simply solely based on nepotism and are completely talentless. At which point, maybe it's not such a bad idea that AI takes over. Because I mean, with the lack of quality that we're getting right now, might as well, right? Thanks so much for watching. This has been Ultiori. You ask, we answer.
Carve it in and I'll make you feel like you on the cloud and you can't sit still when we on the floor, when I'm on the force, when you use the force, there's no problem.